My name is Philip Zimbardo. I'm a psychologist, and I created the Stanford prison experiment. The aim of the experiment was to see how readily people would conform to the roles of prisoner and guard in simulated prison life. I wanted to see how readily people that were good, given the right circumstances, would turn bad. This transition is called the Lucifer effect. It's really interesting to see what initially was an experiment turn into real life for the subjects of this experiment.
Over 70 men volunteered for Zimbardo's experiment.
And they completed a battery of psychological tests. We picked 24 who were the most normal and most healthy. Half are going to be guards, half are going to be prisoners. It's like flipping a coin, and heads, this one's a guard, this one's a prisoner. So at the beginning, there's no difference in the kinds of people who are in your two groups.
Guards, we were issued a uniform, which was a plain sort of khaki or lighter colored uniform.
And then we gave them the symbols of power, handcuffs, a whistle, a big billy club. And then the other thing we gave them were silver reflecting sunglasses.
When you have mirror sunglasses on, then nobody can see your eyeballs. I think that anytime you put on what essentially is a mask, and you mask your identity, then it allows you to behave in ways that you would not behave if you didn't have the mask on.
Although we couldn't act violently or overly aggressive with the prisoners, our outfits still created a sense of fear, even though we couldn't use them to assert our authority.
August 14th was the day the experiment started. We were arrested at our homes and taken into custody of the local police. We were treated like criminals.
The guards then put a blindfold on them, stripped them naked, and then they put them in dresses. They had to know the number, and they could only be referred to by that number.
Mine being 5401. They gave us smocks with no underwear and a stocking cap to put on our heads. I felt degraded, oppressed, and humiliated while I was in that outfit.
And they had a chain on one foot, which was put there to remind them at all times of their loss of freedom. So all of these things produces a sense of being dehumanized.
In the beginning of the experiment, none of us took it seriously. On the first night, the guards woke us up for counts, which would last for long periods of time. The guards weren't too hard on us, and we still had the "this is only an experiment" mentality.
The feelings that all the prisoners developed in that small amount of time were feelings that would normally occur when a person is in prison for a long time.
The prisoners rebelled. They barricaded themselves in their cells and said, "We refuse to come out." They took off their numbers. They didn't want to be de-individuated. They started cursing the guards to their face. And the key turning point was the guards began to think of them as dangerous prisoners.
When the prisoners refused to come out of their rooms, we used fire extinguishers and put the ringleader, prisoner number 5401, into solitary confinement.
When all the prisoners decided not to come out of their cells, we wanted to show the guards that we were no longer going to put up with them. Since it was my idea, I was put into solitary confinement, and I was then known as the ringleader.
The prisoners had punishments such as push-ups, endless jumping jacks, and cleaning. The worst kind of torture we used was when we started to mess with them psychologically.
The guards gave certain privileges to certain prisoners. They set up a privileged cell and allowed the prisoners to wash, brush their teeth, and eat special food in front of the other prisoners. This caused more prisoners to obey the rules, but also created distrust in between the prisoners.
Because of what prisoner 819 did, myself and that.
Prisoner 819 was feeling sick and emotionally broke down. I talked to him about the issue in another room and let him rest outside of the prison. When I asked him if he wanted to leave, he said that he wanted to stay and prove that he was a good prisoner because the other prisoners thought he was bad. I reassured him that this was not a real prison, and he immediately changed his mind and decided to leave.
Or you can keep your blankets, and 416 will stay in another day. We got 3, guess 1. Keep your blankets, 416, you're going to be in there for a while.
I was brought in as a stand-in prisoner. I spent my first day in solitary while other prisoners were on hunger strike. A few days later, I was convinced that it was a real prison run by psychologists and not the government.
Due to the nature of the experiment, I decided to end it after the 5th night. The physical and psychological torture was too much for the prisoners to handle.
Every day after that, another prisoner broke down in a similar way. Broke down, extreme stress reaction. We released another one on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Nobody who was in that study could deny that the prisoner breakdowns were genuine. They were scary to see. They were upsetting to us. They were unexpected, but they were very clearly the real thing.
The violence escalated extremely at night when the guards thought no one was watching after the supervisor left. The results of this experiment were unprecedented. It also showed the psychological effects of torture on prisoners and also the relationship between prisoner and guard.
The Lucifer effect is Zimbardo's name for the phenomena of how readily almost every normal person, given the right circumstances, can become an agent of evil. Zimbardo's idea for the experiment came from the event of the Abu Ghraib prison, when U.S. soldiers tortured Iraqi prisoners physically and psychologically during the war.
When we got to Abu Ghraib, it was eerie. People were being told to rough up Iraqis that wouldn't cooperate. I mean, they're torturing, they're abusing detainees. You're looking at the situation thinking, they've condoned this, but why? And if it wouldn't have been for those photos, no one would have ever believed what was going on over there.
At Abu Ghraib, ordinary people perpetrated extraordinary abuses.
The soldiers took pictures of their actions and were happy about what they were doing.
No, in our study there are a set of social psychological variables that can make ordinary people do things they never could imagine doing.
After only 6 days, Dr. Zimbardo shut down his experiment.